Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. This is Embodied Enlightenment, and I'm here with my dear friend Amrit Sandhu, who is an amazing yogi and just an inspirational soul.
It's such a treat to be here.
And he has an incredible podcast called Inspired Evolution. But the primary reason why we're getting together and how we kind of manifest it into each other's life is to kick each other's ass a little bit. And that is what today's conversation is all about, bringing conscious thought and taking conscious action when you're in the face of resistance. So thank you so much for being here again.
It is such a gift to be here.
Yeah. So resistance, it shows up in all of our lives.
Totally.
Yeah. All the time for me.
More often than not. Yeah. So the first point where I started to really identify that, like, I guess we've always interfaced with resistance, and there was always that piece of the puzzle which I never really... I think I was having this podcast today, and it's like, once you're aware of something, you can actually start to shift it, right? So once you reveal it, then you can heal it, is kind of the quote, right? And I didn't really identify resistance as a thing. Like, I had... what do you call them, procrastination techniques, and I would just avoid doing the things that I was meant to really do and all that sort of stuff, which I think most of us interface with, and I'm not by any means healed. Like, I still interface with resistance today, but the biggest I guess place where it showed up that I started working through my resistance was in a couple of areas of my life, and it happened all throughout last year. So first it started with when I set up the podcast. Right? So when I first started the podcast, there was this whole, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that, there's going to be this involved, and there's going to be that involved. And I know we sat down and set up to set up a podcast, and you were amazing at it. You were just like, dong, 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 things just dropped in. But my biggest piece when helping people go through, like, the inspired podcasting thing is, like, let's just remove all resistance. And that's why, like, when I deliver the course, it's literally just... it's bare bones, it's stripped back, it's everything you need. Literally, if you were diligent, you could have yourself on iTunes on the next day.
Yeah.
So I sneakily say in a month, but literally it could be the very next day. If you hit all the points. And so when I was doing it, I was surprised at the steps that were laid out for me to do it, but how much, like, internal, just, in need of a better way of putting it, bullshit there was in the way. It was like, just coming up with a name was a challenging, coming up with, like, what the, and so I've just each little piece is like, what's the equipment going to be now? And, like, spent, like, time trying to, like, wrap my head around equipment for the podcast. And then it was like, what am I going to use to record it? And it's like, how much am I going to edit it? And every time the one guiding thing that came to me was like, it's just resistance. Mm-hmm. It's just resistance. Just keep moving.
What do you think you're resisting?
It's interesting because now I've got this philosophy that resistance has a lot to do with you're not meant to go in that direction for some reason. Like, I feel like, actually, that's what I think the definition of procrastination is for me, is like, you're not actually ready to drop into what it is that you want just yet because of some sort of belief system or something being in the way. But in terms of resistance, I think it's just stale programming that's in the way. It's you've already made decisions to take action or something of the same vein, and then what happens is you there's other parts of you that are still catching up, and you haven't really integrated that as part of the full picture. And one thing that really helps me is, like, visualizing. Right, so if I can visualize the end outcome, then it accelerates, like, the pushing through the resistance so much easier. And it's interesting because I can't always visualize the end outcome, but those are the times when the most resistance is present, so they go hand in hand. My little hack for that is, some of your listeners may have a partner or something. I can always visualize my girlfriend, right? And so I can always visualize having the conversation with her about how surprised I am at myself that I made it there, even though I can't visualize the outcome. Right?
That's beautiful.
So it's like, instead of, like, seeing myself with, oh, yep, I've got a podcast call and I'm having these conversations, like, this would be a perfect visualization. Just see myself seated opposite from you with a microphone. Boom. It'd be so easy to visualize that. But my mind won't go there, sometimes. Like, if this was early days podcasting for me, it was just, like, so impossible to visualize. And so in that case, I would imagine myself on a couch somewhere, just sitting next to my girlfriend going, oh my God, I can't believe it. it actually happened. I got a podcast, and it's like we're talking, and I'm meeting like really interesting people and having really great conversations. This is next level.
And do you know what that is? It's just being general in the vibration. Because Kay is always with you, and Kay is your girlfriend. For all of those that don't know,
she's more than my girlfriend. Yeah.
She's your partner. So because you're more general with the vibration, but you can tap into how it would feel to share that with her. You know, I think we get so caught up. Our mind creates these illusions that we can't obtain something because we're trying to create the matter in our mind instead of just being in the vibration of the feeling of how that exchange would feel like. Yeah, it would.
Right. Yeah. So
get general.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I didn't realize that was serving me that well. I just use it as a little bite, like side hack.
Yeah. You said something really interesting about procrastination, and I would love to push you a little bit because if I feel like there's so many people that can't decipher the difference between procrastination and what true resistance is, and I do feel like they are an entangled vibration. So you've taken some really big decisions in your life. You've made some really big life changes. And if there's listeners out there right now that are feeling the pull to take big life changes, how can they understand if it's true procrastination or if it's resistance?
Okay, so my belief about procrastination, which beliefs are open to be challenged, is that your soul and your spirit kind of know where you want to go, but your body, your mind, your emotions don't follow along. They don't tack into like a correlation for some reason. And I believe that maybe, everything in due time, the procrastination dissipates. In terms of resistance, I think it's much more of a fear-based equation. Sorry, engineer coming out of me. But yeah, I think it's much more of a fear-based equation. So this was evident last year when I can weave this in through just a really neat story, which was basically last year. Last year I quit my job, right? And I was working for a multinational corporation as a structural engineer and just corporate management and building high-rise towers. So we build anything from 45 stories to 90 stories. And it was rewarding at the end of the job to look back and be like, whoa, we built that. But it didn't really align with my values, just because, raping and pillaging resources out of the earth and sticking them into the city. And if it was building homes for people, that would have been cool, but most of them were empty because they were just investments for people and they were just literally just sitting there and no one was living in them. We could tell by the water usage rates. Anyway, whole nother kit and caboodle. But in that, I had known for about 2 years, like the day, I can tell you right now, the day one I went to my job, right, at this new multinational corporation, which was like the pinnacle of me reaching the peak of my career. I was like, 27, working for one of the best companies in the world, in construction, right? And I realized immediately, and I remember looking at my regional director, and then on top of him was basically just the CEO, and just looking at him and going, that's not me. That's that, like 100%. That's not me. Like I'm a lot of things, but not that. And this was a corporate ladder, right? So I was like, why am I putting my energy into this, right? And it demands a lot of energy. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 6 days a week in Australia. Construction is intense, but I'm super grateful for it because it gave me the opportunity to, like, if there wasn't that much pressure, I wouldn't have squished out of it. But so immediately there was this procrastination that flared up for work because it was like, I know I'm meant to be doing something else, and I knew that I wasn't meant to be going to work. So I was procrastinating already a decision that had already sort of clicked into place, right? Energetically, that like I'm not meant to be working here anymore, and construction is likely not for me. But I had no idea like how to, like, what that precipitated to. So I just spent all these years working for other companies and then like getting a really good degree and studying, working at the same time, putting so much energy to get myself there. So that's an idea of procrastination. And then the resistance piece comes in the next 2 years after that, where it was like it took me 2 years to quit my job because there was so much fear around opportunity, first and foremost, right? And there's a really interesting punchline to this joke, which is when I when I was, the 2 years I spent in my job, I stayed there because I thought it was one of the most amazing opportunities life could ever give me, right? I was just like, this is the opportunity. But then when I quit, there's been more opportunities than I could ever even imagine. Now it's like, which opportunity do you run with? You know,
because you got into the alignment of your soul. Yeah,
right. And
you
so,
stopped swimming upstream of the river. You're like, man, I can just let go and like be with the river.
It's crazy, right? So now there's podcasting. I coach and consult mindfulness on on construction sites. The same people that were like stressed out by me, like telling them what to do, like fitting them into a spreadsheet and basically timelines and stuff. I'm going out and supporting those people through meditation, and it's just so much more rewarding, you know. And corporate mindfulness and all that sort of stuff. So it's, you know, to have that come 360 was basically the biggest thing that showed up for me last year. Was I actually started meditating on courage, right? And for a long time I thought courage was actually fearlessness. I never really questioned it, you know. Maybe I watched too many Braveheart movies or something. I don't know, you know. I was just like, courage is like, you know, like fearlessness. And then the definition of courage came in, and it was like, no, courage is having fear
and doing it anyway
and taking action anyway.
Yeah. Almost
like having fear and then taking action into your fears.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that started coming, and I was like, wow, I really respect courageous people. And then obviously there's a whole dialogue in there about if you can see it in other people, then it's in you as well, obviously, because you're identifying it. And then I was like, I'm going to just have to take the leap of faith. I was heavily supported by this podcasting thing because I started the podcast and I interviewed people such as yourself, living life on their own terms, super inspirational people. And then I was like, I wonder how they did it. And it quickly precipitated that there was no formula. It was just a step into the unknown. And then I've quickly realized that is going to take courage. And that the courage is going to be required 10 years from now. I can wait and have a midlife crisis at 40, 45, like everybody does, and then realize I just spent the last 15 years just literally not listening to my soul's calling. You know, I just procrastinated for 15 years, right? Or I procrastinated for 2 years and all the resistance that came on the other side of it, you know? So
what's an action that you can provide the listeners to get more into a space of courage?
So for me, it was about, again, what you what you reveal, you can heal, right? So the first piece is to go, like, even when I realized what courage meant, like in the background or like in the back of my head, all these things went click, 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 click. You know, it's like these are the things that you've been afraid of. You know, before it was like, oh, fearlessness is courage, and like that's not a whole piece. You know, just follow your bliss, do what you love. You know, which is a great philosophy. Don't still adhere to that philosophy, but it's also important to acknowledge your shadows, your fear, and what's going on in there, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, so as soon as I like realized what courage meant, and I was like, oh, there's things I should be moving towards, because that's what courage basically said to me as I meditated on it. All these things went dunk, 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 dunk. Like these are the things you need to face, and I was just like, oh my god. Right, so if you can reveal it, you can heal it. And then it's all about taking bite-sized action, right? Like bite-sized action. I didn't run away and like leave my job and move to a Caribbean island and just be like, yo, you know, give me a coconut, I'm going to drum for the next 4 days, which is totally inspiring to me, right? So if you've done that, please get in touch. I want to podcast you. But at the same time, like, it was about, okay, so, you know, and I'm engineer, so I'm very conservative. It was like, all right, I'm going to see what this whole podcasting thing's about, right? And then like interview people that have done what I've done so that I can garnish the tips and tricks and habits and hacks of how they manifested their ideal life. Interesting piece of that was I was hoping to last about another 2. I gave myself a whole another 2 years of podcasting before I was going to quit my job. And then I lasted 3 months because it quickly precipitated that I needed to take courage, and courage, no one's going to give that to you, right? It's you moving towards your fear. But this is why I say take bite-sized courage, because as soon as you find like a little piece, like a resistance piece for me was podcasting, and that's why I started the conversation here. As soon as I set up a podcast and that happened, and it was like, oh my god, I could do that, you know, and it arrived. That feeling on the other side of your fear is beyond bliss. That liberation, right? So I firmly believe we operate from 2 things, either love or freedom. That freedom that you experience on the other side of your fear is so beautiful. There are no words.
Thank you. So, such wisdom. Such wisdom.
I'm just reflecting.
Yeah, I mean, but that's where you're able to pass on your wisdom, right? I always say that knowledge is never in what we learn. It's always in what we experience.
I'd almost like to, for me, the anchoring of that is, I believe that knowledge is what you learn, right? But as soon as you've assimilated it through embodied enlightenment, right, it becomes wisdom. Right? As soon as I've embodied it in some way, for me, it becomes wisdom at that point. And that's why experience is just so vital to everything, because experience transforms knowledge into wisdom.
Beautiful. Oh, I love it. So good. Is there any other little nuggets that you want to share?
There are nuggets away.
Before we wrap up this podcast?
In the face of fear and, in like resistance and, procrastination and taking action, I really hope you do take that action. I'm driven basically because I care about your health, and the biggest piece to your health is putting yourself in alignment with your purpose. If you're doing what you're meant to be doing, you will experience levels of vitality you've never even imagined possible for yourself. So that is my biggest message, and that is really what I'm put here to share. And so thank you so much for creating the space for that and having me here today.
Yes, thank you everyone so much for listening, and thank you so much for just carving out some time for us to have a conscious conversation and to share it with everyone else. Where can my viewers find you?
The easiest place, right, is the Inspired Evolution podcast. Every week there's an episode that rolls out. On the back of that, you'll find little social media posts. The best way, if you really want to have a one-on-one, is Facebook. Facebook Messenger me, please. I often check my others folders because there's so many people coming in from there, and connection's one of my highest values. So please do get in touch. I love to hear from you.
Thank you again so much. I'll put all the links to your social channels in the description. And as always, if you guys can just go over and give me some feedback, let me know what you want to work on. Let me know how these podcasts are resonating with you. So leave some feedback in the iTunes section. This has been Embodied Enlightenment with Carrie, and I will connect with you next week. Thanks so much.
You.